The year was 1944. Europe was a continent scarred by war. And even the smallest villages bore witness to unimaginable horrors. Captain James Carter of the British Army arrived in such a village. Nestled deep within the French countryside. He wasn't just there for the liberation, a cryptic, handwritten letter had led him to this place, hinting at a dark secret buried beneath the rubble and the sorrow. The letter spoke of betrayal, a hidden treasure of information, and a woman who held the key. As his company set up a temporary base, James felt a gnawing unease. The village was eerily silent, the air thick with a heavy sadness that clung to everything. The faces of the remaining villagers were etched with pain and suspicion. They were wary of strangers, and James understood their caution. He knew trust would have to be earned. Among the villagers, one figure stood out, a young woman named Elise Moreau. Her eyes, the color of the stormy sea, held a depth of sadness that mirrored the entire village's suffering. Yet, there was also a spark of resilience, a quiet strength that drew James to her. He noticed she carried herself with a certain dignity, despite her threadbare clothes and the obvious hardships she had endured. James's mission was twofold. He was to provide aid to the displaced and wounded, helping them rebuild their shattered lives. But beneath this humanitarian facade lay the clandestine objective outlined in the letter: to uncover the truth behind the village's hidden secret. It was a truth some powerful figures wanted to remain buried forever. As James began his inquiries, he found the villagers tight-lipped and hesitant. Fear was a palpable force in their lives. Yet, in Elise's eyes, he saw a flicker of recognition, a hint that she knew more than she dared to reveal. He approached her cautiously, offering assistance and sharing his own story, the loss of his family during a bombing raid in London, the emptiness that war had carved into his soul. Slowly, trust began to bloom between them. James learned that Elise had lost her entire family in a Nazi reprisal. She was alone, yet determined to survive and rebuild her life. They worked side by side, tending to the wounded, distributing rations, and offering comfort to the grieving. Their shared experiences forged a bond that transcended language and cultural barriers. Their connection deepened as days turned into weeks. He found himself drawn to her quiet strength, her unwavering spirit, and the way she found beauty even in the midst of devastation. She saw past his uniform and the weight of his responsibilities. Recognizing the loneliness he carried within, they spent evenings talking, sharing stories, and finding solace in each other's presence. Their moments together were stolen fragments of peace amidst the chaos of war. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, James decided to confide in Elise. He told her about the letter, about the secret it alluded to, and about his mission to uncover the truth. He admitted his suspicions that she knew more than she let on. Elise listened intently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she remained silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "This village," she said softly, "holds many secrets, Captain Carter. Some are best left buried." She refused to elaborate, but he saw the fear in her eyes. Before James could press further, a message arrived summoning him to headquarters. He was being reassigned. With a heavy heart, he prepared to leave. He knew he couldn't abandon his mission, but he couldn't bear the thought of leaving Elise behind. As he stood before her, ready to depart, he took out a silver pendant. It was a simple design, engraved with the initials J and E. He placed it around her neck. "This is for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A promise. I will come back, Elise. I promise." He also whispered a warning: "If anything happens, find a man named Jean-Pierre in Paris. He'll know what to do." Their farewell was brief. A hurried embrace filled with unspoken words and a desperate hope for a future they weren't sure they would ever have. As James turned to leave, he noticed a shadowy figure watching them from the edge of the village. A chilling premonition washed over him. This was far from over. The days that followed James's departure were filled with an agonizing mix of hope and dread for Elise. She clung to the silver pendant, a tangible reminder of his promise. Every morning, she would wake with a renewed sense of anticipation, praying for his return. But as each day passed without a word, her hope dwindled, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The war was drawing to a close, but the village remained shrouded in a veil of fear. The shadowy figure James had noticed continued to lurk in the periphery. Watching her every move, Elise felt like a hunted animal, constantly looking over her shoulder, never knowing when danger might strike. One morning, a wave of nausea washed over her, followed by a dizzying spell. She realized with a shock that she was pregnant. James's child was growing inside her. The news should have filled her with joy, but instead, it amplified her fear. How could she raise a child alone, in a world still reeling from war, with a mysterious threat looming over her? She desperately tried to contact James, but all her letters were returned, marked, address unknown. Rumors began to circulate that his unit had been ambushed, that he had been killed in action. Elise refused to believe it. She clung to the hope that he was still alive, that he would find his way back to her. Days turned into weeks, and Elise's condition became increasingly difficult to conceal. The villagers, once supportive, began to cast furtive glances, whispering behind her back. She knew she couldn't stay in the village any longer. She had to protect her child. Just when she felt like all hope was lost, Jean-Pierre, the man James had mentioned, appeared in the village. He was a tall, imposing figure with a kind face and a quiet demeanor. He had received a message from James, entrusting Elise to his care. Jean-Pierre confirmed the rumors about James's unit being ambushed, but he also assured her that James had survived. He was still alive, but his mission had become even more dangerous. He couldn't contact her directly without putting her life at risk. Jean-Pierre offered Elise a way out. He had secured passage for her on a ship bound for America. He had also arranged for her to assume a new identity, to start a new life far away from the shadows of the past. Elise was torn. Leaving France meant abandoning everything she had ever known, severing ties with her homeland and the memory of her family. But she knew it was the only way to protect her child. With a heavy heart, she accepted Jean-Pierre's offer. He provided her with a new passport, a sum of money, and a stern warning: forget everything. Elise, forget James, forget this village, start a new life, for the sake of your child. On the eve of her departure, Jean-Pierre led her to a secret location where she could leave a message for James. It was a simple inscription carved into an old stone wall: Elise Moreau, America, remember. As she boarded the ship, leaving behind everything she had ever known, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She scanned the crowd and saw the same shadowy figure she had seen in the village. His eyes fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. A wave of fear washed over her as the ship set sail, carrying her away from the past and into an uncertain future. The past, however, was not so easily escaped. Across the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, James Carter was haunted by his memories of Elise. Having survived the ambush, he had been discharged from the army and was determined to fulfill his promise to return to her. The weight of his failed mission, the unfinished investigation, and the constant worry for Elise fueled his every action. He returned to the village in France, his heart pounding with anticipation, only to find it eerily deserted. The villagers, already weary from war, had scattered in search of new beginnings. He searched for Elise, desperate for any sign, any clue that she was still alive. After days of fruitless inquiries, he stumbled upon an elderly woman tending to a small garden amidst the ruins. She remembered Elise, her voice raspy with age and sorrow. The woman told James a distorted version of the truth. She claimed Elise had succumbed to a fever, a common ailment in the war-torn region, and had been buried in a pauper's grave. The woman, either misinformed or deliberately misleading, painted a picture of despair and hopelessness. James's world crumbled around him. The woman's words were like a dagger to his heart. He refused to believe it at first, clinging to the hope that it was a mistake, a cruel twist of fate. But as the days turned into weeks, and he found no evidence to contradict the woman's story, despair began to creep in. He visited the makeshift cemetery, a field dotted with simple wooden crosses. He searched for Elise's name, but found nothing. The sheer anonymity of the place deepened his sorrow. He felt a crushing sense of guilt, a profound regret for leaving her in the first place. Consumed by grief, James returned to England a broken man. His family urged him to move on, to rebuild his life. He tried to focus on his career, channeling his energy into his work. He started a small business, which, through relentless effort and a bit of luck, grew into a successful enterprise. Years passed, and James became a wealthy and respected businessman. But beneath the veneer of success, he carried a deep wound. He never truly forgot Elise. He tried to honor her memory by discreetly donating to charities that supported war orphans and refugees. Driven by a persistent need to understand what happened, James hired private investigators to search for any trace of Elise. He provided them with her name, her description, and any detail he could remember. The investigators searched in France, in other parts of Europe, but to no avail. The trail had gone cold. Yielding to societal pressure and the loneliness that gnawed at him, James eventually married Sarah, a kind and understanding woman from his social circle. Sarah knew about Elise, about the love he had lost. She accepted that part of him would always belong to the past. Their marriage was a pragmatic arrangement, lacking the passionate spark he had shared with Elise. They had a daughter, Emily, a bright and intelligent child who brought a measure of joy back into James's life. He loved Emily dearly, but he couldn't help but feel a void, a sense of incompleteness that Sarah and Emily couldn't fill. Sarah, however, grew increasingly resentful of Elise's lingering presence in James's life. She saw the pain in his eyes whenever he spoke of France. Whenever he looked at the silver pendant he still kept hidden in his drawer. Driven by jealousy and a desire to erase the past, Sarah secretly sabotaged James's efforts to find Elise. She intercepted letters from potential sources, destroyed documents, and spread misinformation to mislead the investigators. One day, James received a lead. An investigator claimed to have found a woman resembling Elise living in America. Using a different name, James was ecstatic. He prepared to travel to America, determined to find her, to confirm if the rumor was true. Sarah, fearing that James would leave her if he found Elise, took drastic measures. She forged documents, fabricated evidence, and convinced James that the woman in America was a fraud, a con artist trying to exploit his grief. Heartbroken and disillusioned, James reluctantly abandoned his search, believing that his hopes had been cruelly dashed. Yet, fate had a way of intervening. Years later, after Sarah's passing, while sorting through her belongings, James stumbled upon a hidden box. Inside, he found the intercepted letters, the destroyed documents, the evidence of Sarah's deception. Rage and sorrow washed over him in equal measure. He realized he had been robbed of a chance at happiness, manipulated by the woman he had trusted. Driven by a renewed sense of purpose, James reopened his investigation. This time, he was armed with the truth. With the knowledge of Sarah's betrayal, he vowed to find Elise. No matter how long it took, no matter the cost, he felt a surge of hope, a belief that perhaps, after all these years, it wasn't too late. The echoes of the past were calling him across the Atlantic. Years later, in the bustling city of London, fate was quietly weaving its intricate web. Lucas Evans, a young American with a sharp intellect and an insatiable thirst for knowledge, arrived at the prestigious University of London on a full scholarship. He was eager to immerse himself in the world of academia, to explore new ideas, and to carve out a future for himself. Far removed from the modest upbringing he had experienced in America, Lucas carried within him a quiet strength, a resilience honed by a life of hard work and dedication. His mother, Elise, had instilled in him a deep sense of responsibility and a fierce determination to succeed. She had sacrificed everything for him, working tirelessly to provide him with opportunities she herself had never had. He owed her everything. Unbeknownst to Lucas, his arrival in London was not merely a chance occurrence. It was a carefully orchestrated plan, a subtle push from his mother to explore the world, to discover his roots, and perhaps, to find something that had been missing from their lives. At the same university, Emily Carter, the daughter of the wealthy and influential James Carter, was a rising star in the field of literature. She was bright, articulate, and passionate about the arts. She had been raised in a world of privilege and comfort, yet she possessed a deep empathy for others, a genuine desire to make a difference in the world. Emily, however, felt a void in her life. She sensed a distance between her and her father, a guardedness that she couldn't quite understand. He was loving and supportive, but he always seemed to be holding something back, a secret pain that he refused to share. Lucas and Emily met in a literature class, drawn together by their shared passion for poetry and their intellectual curiosity. They struck up a friendship, engaging in lively debates and spending hours discussing their favorite books. They found in each other a kindred spirit, someone who understood their aspirations and challenged their perspectives. As their friendship deepened, a romantic spark ignited between them. They found themselves drawn to each other's warmth, their wit, and their genuine kindness. They spent hours exploring London together, discovering hidden gems and sharing intimate conversations. Their burgeoning relationship was not without its challenges. Sarah's lingering influence cast a shadow over their connection. She viewed Lucas with suspicion, seeing him as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their privileged world. She subtly tried to discourage Emily from spending time with him, planting seeds of doubt in her mind. Despite Sarah's disapproval, Lucas and Emily's bond continued to strengthen. They found solace in each other's company, a refuge from the pressures of their lives. They were young, in love, and determined to build a future together. One evening, while sharing stories about their families, Lucas showed Emily a silver pendant his mother had given him. It was a simple design, engraved with the initials, J and E. He explained that it was a family heirloom, a memento of his mother's past. Emily's eyes widened as she recognized the pendant. She had seen a similar one among her father's belongings, a piece he kept locked away in his study. She had always been curious about it, but he had always refused to talk about it. A seed of suspicion was planted in Emily's mind. She wondered if there was a connection between her father's past and Lucas's family. She decided to investigate, driven by a need to understand her father's hidden pain and to uncover the secrets that had haunted him for so long. The more she observed, the more convinced she became that there was more to Lucas's story than he let on. He was kind, intelligent, and deeply caring, yet there was also a sadness that lingered in his eyes, a sense of mystery that intrigued her. Emily began to subtly ask her father about his past, about his experiences during the war, about any connection he might have had to France. James became evasive, uncomfortable with her questions. He deflected, changed the subject, or simply refused to answer. One afternoon, while James was out, Emily secretly entered his study. She rummaged through his drawers, searching for the pendant, searching for any clue that could shed light on his past. She found a small, leather-bound box hidden at the back of a drawer. Inside, she discovered a collection of old letters, photographs, and documents. She recognized the silver pendant immediately. Her heart pounded in her chest as she began to read the letters, piecing together a story that would change her life forever. As Emily delved deeper into the contents of the leather-bound box, the fragmented pieces of her father's past began to coalesce into a hauntingly beautiful and devastatingly tragic narrative. The letters, penned in elegant script and yellowed with age, spoke of a love affair that had blossomed amidst the horrors of war-torn France. They were filled with passionate declarations, shared dreams, and desperate hopes for a future that had been cruelly snatched away. The photographs depicted a young James Carter, handsome and full of life, standing beside a radiant young woman with eyes that sparkled with warmth and intelligence. It was Elise Moreau. Emily recognized the face from Lucas's description. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a truth that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The documents confirmed Emily's suspicions. James and Elise had been deeply in love. They had shared a bond that transcended the chaos and destruction of war. But their love had been tragically cut short by circumstances beyond their control. As she pieced together the story, Emily felt a surge of emotions: sympathy for her father, admiration for Elise, and a growing sense of unease about Lucas. She realized that Lucas's presence in her life was not a mere coincidence. It was a consequence of a past that had been carefully concealed. A past that was now threatening to unravel the carefully constructed fabric of her life. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Emily confronted her father. She presented him with the letters, the photographs, and the documents. James, visibly shaken, could no longer deny the truth. He confessed everything: his love for Elise, their separation, his belief that she had died, and his subsequent marriage to Sarah. Emily listened in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of her father's revelation. She struggled to reconcile the image of the stoic, reserved man she had known all her life with the passionate, heartbroken lover described in the letters. James pleaded with Emily to understand, to forgive him for keeping the truth from her. He explained that he had wanted to protect her from the pain of his past, from the knowledge that his life had been irrevocably shaped by a love he had lost. Emily, though deeply hurt, couldn't bring herself to condemn her father. She understood his pain, his regret, and his desire to shield her from suffering. But she also felt a sense of betrayal, a feeling that she had been denied a part of her own history. The most devastating revelation, however, was yet to come, as James recounted the events that had led to his separation from Elise. He mentioned that she had been pregnant with his child when he left France. A child he had never known existed. The realization hit Emily like a thunderbolt. If what her father said was true, then Lucas was her half-brother. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind reeling from the implications. She had fallen in love with her own brother. Torn between loyalty to her father and her love for Lucas, Emily made a difficult decision. She knew she couldn't keep the truth from him. He deserved to know his own history, to understand the forces that had shaped his life. But how could she tell him? How could she shatter his world with such devastating news? She wrestled with the dilemma, knowing that whatever she did, someone was going to get hurt. Before she could decide on a course of action, Lucas himself confronted her. He had noticed her distress, her withdrawal, and her strange behavior. He pressed her for answers, demanding to know what was troubling her. Emily, unable to bear the weight of the secret any longer, broke down and confessed everything. She told him about her father, about Elise, about the love affair that had spanned continents and decades. And finally, she revealed the truth about their shared parentage. Lucas listened in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each word. When she finished, he stared at her in disbelief, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock, anger, and betrayal. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was too much to comprehend. Without a word, he turned and fled, disappearing into the bustling streets of London. Emily watched him go, her heart aching with sorrow and regret. She had shattered his world, and she didn't know if he would ever forgive her. The whispers of the past had finally been unveiled, and the reverberations threatened to destroy everything she held dear. Lucas wandered through the London streets, a tempest raging within him. Emily's revelations echoed in his mind, each word a hammer blow against his carefully constructed reality. The world he knew, the life he cherished, had crumbled into dust before his very eyes. He stumbled aimlessly, unaware of his surroundings, lost in a vortex of shock, disbelief, and a profound sense of betrayal. The woman he loved, the woman he had envisioned spending his life with, was his sister. The very notion was abhorrent, repulsive, and utterly incomprehensible. He replayed the events of the past few months in his mind, searching for any sign, any hint that could have prepared him for this devastating truth. Every shared laugh, every tender touch, every stolen kiss now felt tainted, marred by the knowledge of their shared blood. He felt a surge of anger towards Emily, towards James, towards Elise, towards everyone who had conspired to keep this secret from him. He had been living a lie, a carefully crafted illusion designed to protect him from the harsh realities of the past. But beneath the anger, a deeper, more insidious emotion began to surface, a crushing sense of self-loathing. He felt dirty, tainted, as if he had unknowingly committed an unspeakable sin. How could he have been so blind? How could he have allowed himself to fall in love with his own sister? He needed to escape, to distance himself from Emily, from London, from the suffocating weight of his newfound reality. He needed time to process what he had learned, to grapple with the enormity of the situation, and to decide what to do next. He found himself drawn to the familiar comfort of his mother's address, a small flat he rented near the university. As he unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of her perfume, the sight of her photographs, and the gentle hum of her music washed over him, offering a temporary respite from the turmoil within. Elise was surprised to see him. He had not informed her he was coming. She noted his pale face, his haunted eyes, and the tension that gripped his body. She knew something was terribly wrong. He didn't speak at first, simply staring at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Tell me the truth, Mother," he demanded. "Tell me everything." Elise, sensing the gravity of the situation, hesitated. She knew that the truth would cause him immense pain, but she also knew that he deserved to know. She had kept the secret for too long, protecting him from a past that had now come back to haunt them. She recounted her story, From her first encounter with James Carter in war-torn France to her desperate flight to America. She explained her reasons for keeping the truth from him, her desire to shield him from the complexities and pain of her past. Lucas listened in stunned silence, his face growing increasingly grim with each word. He learned of his father's identity, of the love that had bloomed amidst the chaos of war, and of the circumstances that had led to their separation. He felt a strange mix of emotions, a surge of pride in knowing his father was a brave and honorable man, a pang of sadness for the love that had been lost, and a deep sense of resentment towards his mother for keeping the truth from him for so long. When Elise finished her story, Lucas remained silent for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Why, Mother? Why didn't you tell me?" Elise's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to protect you, Lucas," she said softly. "I wanted you to have a normal life, free from the shadows of the past. But you robbed me of the chance to know my father." Lucas replied, his voice tinged with bitterness. "You robbed me of the chance to make my own decisions." He turned away from her, unable to meet her gaze. He felt a profound sense of betrayal, a feeling that his mother had manipulated his life, shaping his destiny without his consent. He needed to confront James, to demand answers, to understand why he had been kept in the dark for so long. But he also feared the confrontation, the prospect of facing the man who was both his father and the reason for his current turmoil. Driven by a desperate need for closure, Lucas made a decision. He would seek out James Carter. He would confront him with the truth. He would demand answers, and he would finally understand the secrets of the past that had shattered his reality. Lucas tracked down James Carter's London residence. The opulent mansion stood in stark contrast to the modest life he had always known, a tangible symbol of the vast chasm that separated their worlds. He hesitated before ringing the bell, a wave of apprehension washing over him. What would he say? How would he react? He braced himself for a confrontation, steeling his resolve to demand the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The door was opened by a stern-looking butler, who regarded Lucas with undisguised suspicion. "I wish to speak with Mr. James Carter," Lucas stated, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. The butler, after a moment's hesitation, ushered Lucas into a lavishly decorated drawing room. James Carter entered a few moments later, his face etched with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Lucas," James said, his voice filled with a cautious warmth. "What brings you here?" Lucas fixed him with a steely gaze. "I know," he declared, his voice ringing with barely suppressed anger. "I know about Elise Moreau. I know about everything." James's face paled. He knew that Emily must have revealed the truth. The past, which he had so carefully buried, had finally resurfaced, threatening to shatter the fragile peace he had managed to construct. He gestured for Lucas to sit, but Lucas remained standing, his body rigid with tension. "Tell me," Lucas demanded, his voice trembling with emotion. "Tell me why you never told me. Tell me why I was kept in the dark for so long." James, his shoulders slumping with resignation, began to recount the events of his past, his voice tinged with sorrow and regret. He spoke of his love for Elise, their forced separation, his mistaken belief in her death, and his subsequent marriage to Sarah. He explained that he had wanted to protect Lucas from the pain of his past, from the knowledge that he was the product of a love that had been tragically lost. He had feared that revealing the truth would only cause him more suffering. Lucas listened in stony silence, his anger slowly simmering down, replaced by a profound sense of disappointment. "You had no right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You had no right to make that decision for me. You robbed me of the chance to know my own history." James reached out to touch Lucas, but Lucas flinched away. "I know I made mistakes," James said, his voice filled with remorse. "I only wanted what was best for you." "Best for me?" Lucas scoffed. "You call this best for me? Discovering that the woman I love is my sister? Learning that my entire life has been a lie?" The room fell silent, the weight of their shared pain hanging heavy in the air. James struggled to find the words to comfort Lucas, to ease the pain he had inflicted. But he knew that there was nothing he could say that would truly make amends. "What about Emily?" Lucas asked, his voice laced with anguish. "How could you let us fall in love? How could you stand by and watch as we unknowingly committed incest?" James's face contorted with pain. "I didn't know," he said, his voice barely audible. "I swear to God, I didn't know. I only discovered the truth recently. After Emily confronted me with the letters." Lucas stared at James, trying to discern whether he was telling the truth. He wanted to believe him, to find some solace in his words. But the weight of his own pain, his own confusion, made it impossible. He turned and walked away, leaving James standing alone in the drawing room, his face etched with sorrow and regret. As he stepped out into the London streets, Lucas felt a profound sense of loss, a feeling that he had lost not only Emily but also a part of himself. He returned to his mother's flat, seeking solace and guidance. He found her waiting for him, her eyes filled with anxiety. He recounted his conversation with James, his voice raw with emotion. Elise listened in silence, her face mirroring his pain. When he finished, she embraced him tightly, offering him the only comfort she could, her unconditional love. "I'm so sorry, Lucas," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "I never wanted this to happen." Lucas clung to her, seeking refuge in her arms. He knew that his mother had acted out of love, but he couldn't help but feel that her actions had ultimately caused him more harm than good. The days that followed were filled with a suffocating sense of grief and uncertainty. Lucas withdrew from his studies, unable to focus on anything but the turmoil within. He avoided Emily, unable to face her, to reconcile the love he felt for her with the knowledge of their shared blood. He questioned everything he had ever believed in, everything he had ever strived for. What was the point of pursuing his dreams if his life was built on a foundation of lies? What was the point of seeking happiness if it was always destined to be snatched away? Elise watched her son with growing concern. She knew that he was struggling to cope with the weight of his newfound reality. And she desperately wanted to help him. But she also knew that there was nothing she could do to erase his pain, to undo the past. One evening, as Lucas sat staring blankly out the window, Elise approached him and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Lucas," she said softly, "you can't let this destroy you. You're a strong, resilient young man. You have so much to offer the world." Lucas turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair. "What do you want me to do, Mother?" he asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Pretend that none of this ever happened? Pretend that I'm not in love with my own sister?" Elise's eyes filled with tears. "No," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want you to forgive yourself, to forgive your father, and to forgive me. We all made mistakes. We all acted out of love, even if our actions ultimately caused more harm than good." Lucas stared at her, his expression unreadable. He knew that his mother was right, that holding on to anger and resentment would only poison his soul. But forgiveness seemed impossible, a distant and unattainable ideal. "I don't know if I can, Mother," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you, or him, or myself." Elise embraced him tightly, her tears soaking into his shirt. He clung to her, seeking a refuge in her arms as she whispered words of comfort. Her love the only constant in his shattered world. The weight of the past threatened to suffocate him. Yet amidst the pain, a flicker of resolve ignited. He couldn't let the secrets of the past dictate his future. Weeks turned into months, marked by a slow and arduous journey towards healing. Lucas remained withdrawn from his studies, but he engaged in long, contemplative conversations with Elise. She shared stories of her life, of her resilience and her unwavering hope. Despite facing unimaginable hardships, he began to understand the sacrifices she had made for him, the difficult choices she had faced. He decided to reach out to James, not out of obligation, but out of a need to understand the man who was his father. Their meetings were fraught with tension, filled with uncomfortable silences and hesitant words. But slowly, as they shared stories and memories, a tentative bond began to form. James confessed his regrets, his deep-seated guilt, and his unwavering love for Elise and Lucas. He spoke of the dark secret that had haunted him for decades, hinting at something far more sinister than a simple wartime romance. He urged Lucas to seek out Jean-Pierre, a man who knew the full truth, a man who could shed light on the events that had shaped their lives. Meanwhile, Emily, devastated by the repercussions of her discovery, sought solace in her father's company. She witnessed his remorse, his desperate attempts to connect with Lucas, and she felt a growing empathy for his pain. She realized that her father, though flawed, was a good man, a man haunted by the mistakes of his past. She resolved to help him find redemption, to help him uncover the truth that had eluded him for so long. Together, Lucas and Emily embarked on a quest to find Jean-Pierre. Following a trail of cryptic clues left by James, their journey led them to the labyrinthine streets of Paris, where they found Jean-Pierre living a quiet life, tending to a small bookstore. He was a wizened old man, his eyes filled with a lifetime of wisdom and sorrow. Jean-Pierre greeted them with a knowing smile, as if he had been expecting them. He listened intently as they recounted their story, his expression growing increasingly somber. When they finished, he led them to a hidden room behind the bookstore, a room filled with dusty files and forgotten documents. He revealed the truth about the dark secret James had alluded to. During the war, James had been part of a secret unit tasked with recovering stolen Nazi gold and exposing a network of collaborators who had profited from the suffering of others. Elise's family had been targeted because her father possessed evidence that could expose a high-ranking official. The man who had followed Elise to America was an agent of that official. Determined to silence her and recover the evidence, Sarah, driven by jealousy and fear, had unknowingly aided this agent in his quest, sabotaging James's efforts to find Elise and protect Lucas. Jean-Pierre handed them a file containing irrefutable proof of the conspiracy. He urged them to expose the truth, to bring justice to those who had been wronged. He also revealed a final, devastating piece of information. The agent who had targeted Elise was still alive, still determined to silence her and protect the secrets of the past. Armed with the truth, Lucas and Emily returned to London, determined to expose the conspiracy and bring the perpetrators to justice. But they knew they were walking into a dangerous game, a game where powerful forces were at play. They decided to confront Elise with the truth, knowing that it would reopen old wounds. She listened in stunned silence, her face etched with a mixture of disbelief and horror. The revelation that Sarah had been manipulated by a dangerous criminal sent a chill down her spine. Suddenly, a chilling realization dawned upon them. The agent was likely still watching them, still determined to silence Elise and protect the secrets of the past. They were no longer safe. As if on cue, a shadowy figure appeared outside Elise's apartment, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Lucas and Emily recognized him immediately. It was the same man who had followed Elise to America, the man who had haunted their lives for so long. A desperate chase ensued through the labyrinthine streets of London. Lucas and Emily, with Elise in tow, desperately tried to evade their pursuer. They knew that if he caught them, their lives would be in grave danger. During the chaos, Elise was separated from Lucas and Emily. She found herself cornered in a deserted alleyway, the agent looming over her, a menacing glint in his eyes. "It's over, Elise," he sneered. "The past cannot be undone. The secrets will remain buried." Elise, despite her fear, stood tall, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You will not silence me," she declared. "The truth will come out." The agent lunged at her, his hand raised to strike. But before he could reach her, a figure emerged from the shadows, tackling him to the ground. It was James Carter. He had been following them, determined to protect Elise and his children from the dangers of the past. A fierce struggle ensued, the two men locked in a desperate battle for survival. Lucas and Emily arrived just as James managed to overpower the agent. But in the struggle, James had been mortally wounded. He lay on the ground, gasping for breath, his eyes filled with regret and a profound sense of peace. "Protect them," he whispered to Lucas, his voice barely audible. "Protect Elise. Expose the truth." With his dying breath, James Carter closed his eyes, finally finding peace after a lifetime of pain and turmoil. Heartbroken and enraged, Lucas and Emily vowed to honor James's dying wish. They turned over the evidence to the authorities, exposing the conspiracy and bringing the perpetrators to justice. The high-ranking official who had orchestrated the crimes was arrested and brought to trial. His reputation shattered, his career ruined. In the aftermath of the trial, Lucas, Emily, and Elise found a measure of peace. They had faced the demons of the past, uncovered the truth, and brought justice to those who had been wronged. The bond between them, forged in tragedy and strengthened by adversity, became unbreakable. Lucas, though he could never fully reconcile with the fact that he and Emily were siblings. Found a way to honor their connection. They became close friends, supporting each other through life's challenges, sharing their hopes and dreams. Emily, inspired by her father's courage and her family's history, dedicated her life to fighting for justice and equality. She became a lawyer, defending the rights of the marginalized and the oppressed. Elise, finally free from the shadows of the past, found a measure of happiness in the love and support of her son and granddaughter. She lived out her remaining years surrounded by family, sharing her wisdom and her resilience with those around her. The story of James, Elise, Lucas, and Emily became a testament to the enduring power of love, forgiveness, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. It served as a reminder that even the darkest secrets of the past can be overcome, that even the deepest wounds can be healed, and that even amidst tragedy, hope can endure. The echoes of their story reverberated through generations, a lasting reminder of the importance of family, the strength of the human spirit, and the enduring power of love to conquer all. The secrets of the past, once buried deep, had finally been brought to light, paving the way for a brighter, more just future. While love between Lucas and Emily could never be, their shared lineage brought them closer, the strongest familial bond forged, and their story echoing through the annals of time.